So I think we're ready to start now. A very, very good afternoon to all of you who are here today, and a warm welcome to our webinar, Productive Practice. As I said earlier, maybe some of you were not there, today's webinar is not about the digital exams, but I will make an announcement here about the digital exams. We will be having the digital exams from November onwards, and these will be open till March 2021 for the time being. The digital exams, we are waiting on details of the syllabus, but most probably it's going to be as your exam syllabus, leaving out the supporting tests. The supporting tests will not be examined. Your pieces and your technical work will be examined. As soon as we have more details from London, we will pass it on to all our customers and teachers and students. So that being said, also, there's one more thing I need to add here. There will be no calculated result component in the exam. So what happened in the interim digital solution will not apply here. It will be based totally on your pieces and your technical work. The supporting tests will be marked from your performance of your pieces. Well, so let's go ahead now and start this interesting webinar. It's called Productive Practice. So how many times have all of us as teachers had a discussion about how little the children or your students practice? For me, many times. I'm sure you'll all agree with this. Practicing actually is a very important component of music learning. And when students commit to music learning and come to you, they need to know that the importance of correct and effective practice. So while we do complain about students not practicing enough, we need to be a little careful that we do understand the student's point of view also. We need to be realistic. That student of yours is not only doing music, he's doing 10 other things probably, including the most important at that point of their lives, academics. So it's important we remember this and we advise them on practicing based on this. Of course, I know that sometimes they come back and say, when I've asked a student, how much did you practice this week? So he says, I practiced yesterday, ma'am, for 20 minutes. Very proudly, actually, he says that. And I think to myself that, oh gosh, I'm really going to pull him up. But then I stop myself and ask him, what were the reasons that he practiced only for 20 minutes? Sometimes they're valid, sometimes they're not. Anyway, so let's start this webinar. I'm going to invite Priya, my colleague, to kickstart this productive practice.
Right. Thank you, Anjali. And let's go right to we're going to talk about what is practice, why do we do it? So as you can see, practice put the art of and repetitively doing something. We do it to get better at doing it. I think it's the most important tool in acquiring a skill. We all know that playing an instrument requires considerable skill. Now, what is the primary of music learners? What do you think it is? It'd be nice if you could put that in the chat. Primary goal is to give a performance with and to communicate their music effectively. So if you'd think that it is only through practice that you can actually goal as a music learner. When we talk of skills, and I think we can now go on to a slide so that you can see very clearly where we are at. When we talk of skills, so we have gone through the primary goal of a music learner: communication, conviction, confidence, only through practice. Now, when we talk of skills, we need to appreciate them and so forth. Your oral skills, ear is the most important organ for all musicians. Your visual skills, and then being able to process, unify all these. This requires considerable practice. Planned. All these are well within our through in each of these areas practice. But this is practice that is planned, it is and it makes it to something that is much more than doing over and over again. And that's what we are going to be talking about. My internet connection is unstable, but I guess these are those things we have. Together, teachers and students can on the two main areas of effective practice. These areas are repetition and interleaving. Necessarily involves repetition. We know, of course, the process of repeating must be a three-pronged approach over here. It must be mindful, which means in the moment, in the present, you're focused on there and then. It must be deliberate. Now, deliberate practice requires breadth and depth. How do you do a deliberate practice? It's targeted, it forms your technique, it requires definitely the guidance of a teacher or a mentor, and it requires incorporating into the next practice session. So that is what you call practice. Believe me, 10 minutes of practice is worth an hour of mindless practice. And finally, meaningful. This is when you bring together the skill you have acquired through practice and the musicality, when you find the music behind the notes. That is meaningful practice. Is interleaving. Interleaving is a very important tool, and that is the ability to connect one part of your practice or one section of your music with another to be really productive. For example, it's right there. You can have scales and you have a piece. Why is there an arrow connecting them? And ideally, effective practice would be that your piece is, let us say, in the key of E major. So you play the scale of E major scales. In any case, you put aside time for technical work, play the chord, and then play the scale of the piece of the key into which it modulates. So your pieces and your scale work, your technical work, your musical work get interleaved. Similarly, recording and listening. I think recording nowadays, young people are lucky, they have such easy ways in which they can record themselves right there through their phones. To record and is the best way to evaluate yourself, the best way to keep track of your progress. Now, when you record and listen to yourself, you may notice certain things that you need to correct or that you'd like to sound better. So you incorporate that into your practice, record yet again, and listen yet again. And that's how it carries on, interleaving. And that's a very, very important part of good planned practice. Yes.
Thanks, Priya. I think there was quite a lot of problems with the internet connection and the voice kept breaking up, but you will get a recording as well as a PDF of this presentation. So I'm going to take this forward a little more and go into some details, maybe actually at the moment macro details. We need to have a goal when we are planning practice. Now, what could that goal be? That goal can be you're practicing for a performance or a competition, you've got a concert, or you're having a school competition. You could be practicing for an exam, or what can be nicer than just playing for enjoyment and fun? So let's look at these a little more in details. So when you have a stage performance, which could be a concert or a competition, as I said, please remember that performing on stage is an essential element of your musical journey and musical learning. What happens when we perform on stage? We express ourselves in our own way, and we communicate our music to the audience. So a stage performance is a very important part of your musical learning journey. So let's look at this now. If you have a performance or a competition, what are the steps we are going to take to get to that successfully? Of course, you need to choose a program to suit the occasion. Now you may say that choosing a program is not really practicing, but let's wait and look at the few points I have here. For that, you need to listen to recordings and you need to take decisions as to what works for you. You also need to identify your strengths. Plan your practice focused on this. Everybody has different strengths and it's not as if one size fits all. You need to have consistency because when you're playing on stage, you need to be consistent with your performance every time you're playing, and you need stamina. So your practice has to be geared towards that. You also need a very important element, which is stagecraft. When you're on stage, it's very different from what is happening in your room where you're practicing. You could have nerves. It's very normal. You could break down in your pieces. These are very normal things that happen, but you have to deal with these. And what you could do is keep playing to others, get feedback, and also self-assess through recordings. So now that I've given you these 3 points, all of these require practice. If you're going to be playing to others and building up your stamina and being consistent, getting over nerves, getting over the fact that you may break down in a performance, you will require practice for it. So you have to gear your practice towards that. And also taking decisions like what your program is going to be. You may like certain pieces that you're going to perform, but you might find when you start learning these that you are not able to cope with some component of the piece. There's no harm. You need to change your program. And deciding, it's a lot of self-decisions that you have to take when you're at this level and thinking of how to practice. So all this requires a lot of practice. Let's look at the second point we had. You are preparing for a music exam. Forgive me if I keep saying you, actually the student. I'm sure there are some students here also. So as far as teachers go, I am referring to students when I say you. So your students may be preparing for music exams. Why are music exams important? They are important because they assess and benchmark the level that a student is at in their musical instrument. So they are a very important part of the music learning process. So let's look a little more in details as to what happens when we are preparing for an exam. The exam actually involves a lot of decision making, which has to be taken by the teacher as well as the student. And what could those decisions be? One is a time-based and involvement decision. as to how much time the student will be able to give to practice for the particular exam he's doing 4 months later, 6 months later. That is extremely important. Does he have any roadblocks coming up? Like, is he going for a holiday in between? Is she having college exams? Are they having school exams? Any sports events which might hamper the practice? The second is the musical level. When you decide which exam the student is going to take, you need to be very, very sure of the level and the capability of the student. Because sometimes we do decide to take exams which are higher than what we can do or lower than what we can do. But you need to be at a level where you are confident of what you are going to do. The exam also involves these three aspects. One is technique, one is understanding, and the third is performance. These are all parts of an exam. Now, how do we practice towards this? As far as understanding goes, we need to look at the score away from the instrument. That is also practice. Without the instrument, look at the score, identify theoretical concepts, understand the style of the composer. These are very important points before you really start playing that piece. You may have listened to it, but before you realize it on your instrument, these points are very, very important. It really helps you in your practice. The second point was technique. What are the technical challenges in my program that I have chosen? How am I going to master these? There may be scale passages, there may be octaves. What are the techniques or the technical exercises I'm going to use to overcome the technical challenges? Now, all this is really prep before you really start practicing for the exam. So these are elements that you need to think about. And the last one was your musical ability. You need to think about that. What are the different dynamic levels the pieces require? What is the articulation? What are other techniques that need to be used on my instrument to make sure I play this piece as written, following all the performance directions on whichever instrument you are playing. So it's very important to do some prep work before we start going into the actual practicing of a piece. And finally comes the performance. For the performance, eventual performance, as I mentioned earlier, when you're practicing for a concert, it's the very same thing when you're practicing for an exam. You need to familiarize yourself with the exam setting. Where is your center going to be? You need to play a lot to other people because there's nerves involved here. There are breakdowns involved here too. So play to whoever you can get. And you need to record and self-analyze to measure the progress. So these few things are extremely important before we go into really getting our practice routine into place. The last one we looked at was learning for enjoyment as a hobby. A lot of people do this. They don't have a goal, but their goal is really to enjoy playing music and to be able to share their hobby with others and acquire the skills at a level that you can do so. Now, this is also one form of learning, and definitely it's a very, very important part of music learning. Music should be fun. Music should not be a chore. But remember, and we all know this as teachers, goals are also important. So even if you're learning it as a hobby, you have a goal in mind. You want to play for other people, for your friends. You want to play with your friends. So there is always a goal in mind. So these are the few objectives that we have looked at. And now I'm going to ask Priya to take you through as to how you can target your objectives and some micro details.
Thanks, Anjali, and I do hope my internet connection doesn't let us down again. So when we target objectives, above all, objectives must be achievable. So let's look at some of them. What do we do when we are looking at a practice session? We are looking at honing in on a particular area that requires that day's work. It could be something as basic as learning the right notes. It could be marking fingering, the correct fingering, the fingering you're planning to use, focusing only on dynamics and articulation for that session. And then finally, the finer details of interpretation. What was the composer intending? What is your own personal input into the music? How do you realize a crescendo? All these things are available to you, but they require practice. Yes, even interpretation requires practice. So that is targeting your objective. There are some other objectives we must look at when we are practicing. The top one, musicianship. What does that mean? It means that you look at every single possible potential that your instrument has, whether it's a piano, guitar, explore the instrument, explore the music written for it. Take ownership of the piece of music you're working on, practicing by writing on your score. It's very important to put markings on your score for yourself. It could be something even as simple as remember not to bang out this note, or don't rush at this part. All these little bits of advice that you can give yourself or that your teacher can put for you personalizes your score. It makes it uniquely yours. Every practice session, do remember, write on your music. I think Anjali was telling me something very interesting about something an examiner had told her about writing on a score. Anjali, do you
Yes,
remember?
I'll just share this with you all. Some of you may remember this examiner, Michelle Lee. God bless, she's no longer with us. But she used to come to India a lot, and I spent a lot of time with her. I used to be at the exam centers and steward the exams. And she told me this very, very pertinent piece of advice she gave. She said that, you know, when in an exam room, I see the students' music without any markings, immediately the thought that comes to me is this student is not involved with this music. Of course, by markings, it doesn't mean that you have the musical knowledge answers there. But as Priya said, don't bang this note, play this smoothly, some kind of markings which help you go along and remind you of the mistakes you might have made. So she said, unless there's writing on the music, for me, that student has not really internalized that music, and nor is the student owning that music. So I found that very, very useful. And generally what happens is before an exam, we are erasing every little mark so that the book looks clean. And so I told her, I said, sometimes they just want the book to be clean. But she said, no, we don't want that. We want to see how involved they have been while practicing and while they are playing now.
Thanks, Anjali. That's really interesting. But yes, a word of advice. Do remember not to put any notations that pertain to the musical knowledge segment of the examination. Those, of course, should not be there. But otherwise, write on your music. Memorize the music. Take it within yourself. Have the notes within you rather than in something external. Visualize the music away from your instrument. And a very important part of practice, which a lot of us don't really think of, is challenging yourself physically. What does that mean? It means that if you're at your instrument, if you're sitting at the piano, close your eyes and play. Remove one of your organs of sense and see whether you can still do it. If you're a singer, walk up and down the room and see whether you can control your breath well enough to sing and walk at the same time. Do these kind of little challenges. They are great confidence boosters and they really help you realize your own potential, that you can do so much more than you think you can. Build that into your practice. Do something physically every time you go into a session. So what else do we need to do and what do we need to have in mind? Smart practice. Of course, most important, creating the atmosphere, the right frame of mind, evaluating, planning, warming up. These are all elements of smart practice, which we're going to look at in some detail now. So let's go straight into, smart practice is how you go into your practice, what you do during your practice, and what you take away from your practice. These are the three essential components of smart practice. Create an atmosphere, be in the flow. What does that mean? Every part of you should be engaged. Mind, body, emotions should be completely engaged with the music. This kind of engagement, what does it mean? It requires you not to have distractions and disturbances. Create the right physical space, create mind space. That is what gives you the right atmosphere for your practice. You have to also be in the right frame of mind. There are days, we all know that, teachers, students, all of us, that we just don't want to practice. Take the day off. Or better still, do something that is not rote work, that doesn't require physical repetitive practice, but do something connected with the music you're working on. Listen to a recording of it. Maybe if you don't feel like engaging mentally, just do a little finger exercise that will leave your mind free to roam here and there while your fingers continue to work. Or just maybe look at the score. Stay connected with your music, but be flexible. Do not practice if you are not in the right frame. It's perfectly all right to take a day off. We all do that. And of course, warming up. You need to prevent injuries. There are so many practice-related injuries that have happened. Repeated playing of octaves on the piano, repeated practicing of the rasguero technique on the guitar. These can actually harm you. So warm up, first of all. That's essential for any activity. Sports people do it. Warm up away from the instrument as well as on the instrument. Do your bending, stretching, relax your muscles. When you are practicing, do not keep using the same group of muscles over and over again. If one piece demands a lot of wrist movement, make sure that the next thing you practice is only finger work or arm movement or elbow rotation. So that is smart practice. You're warming up all the time. You're taking care of your muscles. And of course, practice to be really, really productive, it has to be planned. And that's where your scheme of work comes in. It could be a daily plan, it could be weekly, it could be monthly. Teachers, you can help your students do it for them, discuss it with them, whatever suits them and their other timetable and schedule, but planning, setting a goal, keeping a log that tracks your progress are very, very important. No practice can be productive if it's not planned. That's for sure. We always wonder when we're practicing, is it too much? Is it too little? Have I done enough? What should I do more? Well, ideally speaking, and studies have shown that optimum time is 30 minutes. You should always, always take a break after every half an hour of practice. Do not, even if you feel that you can carry on, don't do so. mentally and physically, it is best for you to take a break after 30 minutes. Take a 5-minute break, walk around, stretch, keep hydrated. Very important thing, many of us don't realize that we don't drink enough water and we don't do enough deep breathing during practice. So take a 5-minute break to stretch, drink water, then get back. And as we said earlier, use different groups of muscles. And you would know that your practice is just fine.
Can I share something here, Priya? I remember attending a workshop by Paul Harris in Mumbai, and he made a statement that for better sight reading, you know, he's a specialist in sight reading. The advice
Yes,
he gives is invaluable. Drink a lot of water. And I was wondering to myself, what does he mean? You know, why do we need to drink water to sight read? So he explained it further, and I realized it was really sensible. He says, when you drink water and you're hydrated, your thinking is clearer, your senses are more accurate, and they help you. It translates into using your mind and your eyesight much better.
that
So I
makes
just
sense.
wanted to share that.
I think that really makes sense. And there you have it from Paul Harris, the expert. So just a simple thing like drinking a glass of water makes your practice more productive. Now, of course, when we've done all this planning, how do we assess what we have done? We need to know, evaluate what we have done. Teachers, I would tell you to encourage your students to figure out and find solutions, identify what's going wrong, identify and do some problem solving here, some troubleshooting. That is what, when you evaluate yourself, you would also know, am I just bored practicing? Do I need to do it in some different way? Yes, of course. When you evaluate what your practice has done and how you're sounding at the end of it, it tells you the way forward. That's what tells you how you can go ahead. Because the hardest thing to do is to unlearn an error. We all know that. You learn something and through practice, you keep repeating it, and it becomes reinforced. So always, I think, for every time you evaluate yourself as a student, ask your teacher to check, ask a peer to check, ask a senior to check, ask someone to see that you're doing it right. And that will help you. Certainly. Be realistic. When you're doing all this, be realistic. You know, it's a day and an age where our young people, uh, they want instant answers. They want instant solutions. Everything is kind of instant and immediate. But in music, it doesn't work that way. So do not expect that with 2 practices, you're halfway to mastering a piece. It doesn't work like that. Do it carefully, do it regularly. Never avoid the hard parts. Address them first, is what I would say. And of course, the results will be there. It just takes time. Trust yourself. And remember, it is always about quantity and not about quality. I think so many of us have heard students or maybe their parents saying, oh, but the chances for hours. Now, I'm not to believe those hours translate into anything productive, because not about the time you spend, it is about the quality of that time. I think I said this earlier, 10 minutes of mindful equals 1 hour of practice which has no focus. So being realistic, of course, and yes, taking ownership is what makes your practice effective. You are the person making the music to you and you to the music. When you start listening to yourself, when you take responsibility and ownership, that's the day your practice becomes effective, and believe me, it becomes fun as well. And here again, I must apologize for the unstable connection. I think my voice is probably not reaching all of you, but as Anjali said, we will be giving you a recording later.
Absolutely, but I think we managed to get the gist of it, and so did all the teachers and students on the webinar. Thank you so much. These were invaluable tips, Priya. I'm going to take this a step further now and talk a little bit about practice aids. So, generally, we have spoken about smart practice, effective practice. We have spoken about our goals, what we are practicing towards. But let's just look at a few practice aids. There are so many. So I really didn't know what really to emphasize here, but I just put down a few which I thought were important, and I'll talk you through these. Some of these aids are tangible, and some of them are not tangible, but as important as the ones that are tangible. So if you see here, we have slow practice, maintaining a record, use of technology, memorizing. These are all tangible aids. Then you have things like seeking inspiration, the role of parents, rewards. These, yes, a reward is tangible, but not related to practicing. So let's have a look at this. Let's talk about slow practice. I think this is something all of you advise your students to do, and students take this on really to make their practice more effective as well as get the best results. What does slow practice do for you? It gives you control, it gives you time to look at directions. But remember one thing, when you're practicing slow, do take in the performance directions given. If you have to lift your hand at a slur, lift it on the piano. If you have to do a pizzicato on the violin, do that. If you're doing an appuyando on the guitar, it needs to be done even in that slow time, because otherwise you'll never get it when you bring it up to speed. So play as you would at the correct speed. I think, Priya, were you wanting to share something on slow practice here?
Actually, I did. It was a very nice analogy that I heard. It says slow practice is this is slowing down of a process in time is the same, is the exact counterpart of enlarging an object in space. So imagine if you're very large in space, you can see every detail of it. It's like you're looking at the sun, or I mean, sorry, not the sun, the moon through a telescope, enlarging it in space. So slow practice gives the ability to be able to examine every single detail and make all the necessary adjustments.
And may I also say that in this day and age of technology, it's what we are doing on our phones, on our computers, on our tablets. We are enlarging everything to look at it in detail. So it happens there also. Thank you, Priya. So next, let's look at what happens if you maintain a record. It takes a little effort, yes. The student needs to maintain this record. You need to write down what you are planning to do in this practice session. Once you have that down, after your practice session, do put down whether you achieved that or not. If you achieved it, how you achieved it, some useful methods that you used, how you overcame a certain problem, so that you can refer back to that at any stage. So it's very, very important, and especially when you write out what you are going to do in this practice session, and at the end of the session you tick your boxes, it gives a great sense of satisfaction and is a wonderful reward. Technology. Today is all about technology. We, the older teachers, are getting used to it, are trying to apply it. The youngsters have no problems. They use it. Remember, but you need to choose your apps wisely. There are many practice apps. Now, what happens when you're playing a solo instrument like a guitar or a violin and you don't have the accompaniment? You need to use aids. You need to use a metronome or a drum backing, something to keep in time and get used to the rhythm and the beat of the piece. And There are many apps to do that. Of course, you use it also for tuning. You use apps to tune your instruments also today. So it is very necessary that we start using technology, but use it wisely. Choose the apps wisely, use it as an aid, not that you get so used to it that you can't play without it. Also, if you're traveling and you want to practice, you have your backing tracks on your phone, you can do that. So it's very important to use technology, but in the right way. You can listen to videos, YouTube, decide for yourself what is good, what is not so good, make comparisons. This is all possible because of technology. Let's look at memorizing. A lot of people ask, is memorizing really necessary? Well, if we look at it from the exam perspective, it is not. We don't get extra marks for it. But how does practicing memorizing a piece help? It's a great, great confidence booster because you have everything in your mind. It's like you're imagining the music. It's all there within you. You've internalized every bit of that score, your dynamics, your articulation, every bit that the editorial marks are given, you have internalized that. And it's all in your mind. Nobody can take it away from you. The piece of paper in front of you can fly off, and you may be at a loss as to what to do now. But another very important thing it does is because you've not got your eyes on that piece of paper or your score, you are able to communicate with your audience. You're able to connect, you are able to see them, you are able to get energized by them, and you are able to communicate your music much better. So these are the advantages of memorizing, and I think memorizing is a great tool to use in your practicing. Memorize bits. You don't have to memorize the whole thing as you play along, but do it bit by bit, and you'll find suddenly that you're able to do this. And also, if somebody asks you to perform at the drop of a hat, you can do it because your music is with you, inside you. So memorizing is a great tool for practicing. So let's look now at some intangible practicing aids. Sometimes, as Priya mentioned earlier, you get into a kind of a rut with your practice. You are every time sitting down at your instrument, starting with technical exercises, then going on to your pieces, then going on to doing some theory work, and your practice session just goes round and round in a circle like that. And you start doubting yourself because once boredom sets in, you're not motivated. You start thinking, why am I doing this? At that moment, go back in time and think of what made you start learning music. What was it that inspired you? Was it an artist you listened to? Was it a concert you attended? Was it your school music teacher who you wanted to be like and you idolized? What was it that made you start learning music or show an interest in music? That will get you back on track straight away. Also, attend concerts or listen to performances on YouTube. There's some wonderful recordings, and you get the feeling that, oh, I want to play like this. And to play like this, I need to go back and practice like this person would have practiced before he's reached this level. Also, when you're bored or even otherwise, a lot of teachers advise their students to start or end their sessions with a piece you enjoy playing, you are absolutely fluent in, so that you listen to yourself and you realize, wow, I played this. This is fantastic. So let me go on and look at the next thing I have to do. So inspiration is a great thing, and I think parents here can also help out a lot. Also, reward yourself, especially for young students. You've had a good practice session. Give an incentive. The parents can do that. When you go back to class and you've practiced well, the teacher can have a little treat for you. It's very important that the student stays motivated. So this is what the reward really means. It's definitely tangible. And lastly, the involvement of parents. I have had students who have come to me. I've had many students over the years and lots of experiences. I have always found that where parents are involved in their music learning process, in their practicing at home, the results are always much better. So the parents can help in many ways. Of course, scheduling practice. They can help them by using internet to listen to recitals, concerts, pieces, and they can encourage them. If they see the interest is flailing, they can encourage them to try something else, maybe try a different genre of music. Why not? But parents also must be involved. The practice session of a student should be fun. It should be enjoyable. I know you have to work hard. There is no getting away from the hard work. You need to work hard, but start enjoying the hard work. Priya,
Yeah,
would you like to add something
I
here?
wanted to say that if I can be heard, practicing can be very lonely. It can be a very lonely thing for a young person when you're in your struggle. So as you said, Anjali, something like involvement and encouragement of parents, support important in keeping your confidence, keeping your spirits high, and feeling that you're not alone in this practice. People who are supporting and encouraging you. So that's really that atmosphere is so important. It really helps in practice.
So now, before we wind up, when we started planning this webinar, it was supposed to be a live webinar, live workshop. We spoke to some students who have made it. They are young musicians and they've done very well with their music. They've achieved or are in the process of achieving their dreams and all they wanted for themselves with music. A couple of them are here today with us. We had spoken to them, Priya had spoken to them as to how they did it, how their practice sessions were done. We have with us, I think, Anuvrat and Josh. Anuvrat, Gopal, can you unmute Anuvrat if he can take us through what he has said to us rather than me reading it? Anuvrat, would you be able to do that? Gopal, are you able to do that? Okay, I've unmuted.
Anubrat, he was there.
Yeah, he is there. I'm not able to unmute him.
Yeah. Anubrat, can you?
Are you able to unmute him?
Yeah, I've done that. I think he's on mute over there. Anubrat is on mute.
Okay, all right, never mind. So I will share with you a little bit of what Anuvrat said to us when Priya interviewed him. Anuvrat Chowdhury is a young pianist, a brilliant pianist. He's an ATCL and an LTCL, and he's preparing for his FTCL. He was the Young Musician of the Year for 2019, and he was a finalist in 2020 for Conbrio. And at the moment, he is at Trinity Laban in the UK doing his M.Mus. So he has realized his dreams and is in the process of doing that. And when we asked him what were his tips for productive practice, this is what he said. He talked about dividing the pieces into small sections, either by phrases or by the structure of the piece. He felt that the smaller the section, the more productive the practice feels. It leads to a sense of achievement and completion, which in turn motivates one to practice more. He stressed the fact that daily practice is a must, but the time spent could be flexible depending on other commitments. Practice for the day what you feel you can achieve effectively. That is what is very important. And what we spoke about, maintain a practice diary log listing your aim and achievements, as well as what remains for each practice session. That way you can see your progress at a glance. So thank you, Anurad, for sharing this with us. The next person we spoke to is Shantanu Datta, and Priya is going to take you through this.
Shantanu is a very fine musician. He is an FTCL awardee in classical guitar. He's a performer. He's a composer who's making waves across the country. He is also, you would be interested in knowing, an IT graduate. So he really knows the value of time. So I'm going to take his last point first. When I talked to him, he said time is always, always a problem with young people doing so many things. One way to have productive practice is to avoid mindless repetition. This will reduce your practice time, quality over quantity. He feels that it's important to analyze, understand the piece away from the instrument also, both musically and to identify and mark out the technical challenges in the piece before beginning to learn it. And he says that every single practice session that he does is an exercise in mindfulness. We had talked about mindfulness, where he is both conscious of music and of every single element in his body, his posture, his finger movement, his placing, the relaxation of his shoulders when he's playing. That is really mindful practice. Very, very invaluable tips from Shantanu. We have more coming up. Anjali?
We have now somebody who is with us also. He is at this webinar, Josh Henriks from Mumbai. So Gopal, if you could unmute Josh.
Yeah, ma'am.
So is Josh, yeah, hi, Josh. Let me see if I can get your video on. Is it okay if I get your video on?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Can you allow the video, Gopal? I can't find him here. Okay, okay, one sec.
Yeah.
Josh, you should be able to put on your video now. Please check.
Yeah, just a minute. No, it still shows that the host has disabled to switch off the video.
Okay. All right. So let's have you speaking. I don't want to waste too much time here. So let's have you speaking.
Yeah, so I really believe in slow practice, which is why I think it's important to break up the piece into small parts and practice each part slowly, especially those sections which you find difficult first, and then you can work on the easier sections later. And then I also really believe in recording when you practice, because a number of times we see that what you listen back to yourself once you record is completely different from what you thought you were playing while you were playing that part. So that helps you analyze your playing really well. And as I've said, also playing a lot of scales and etudes, which helps improve your technical facility over the instrument.
Thank you, Josh. That was really useful. And can you just tell us one more thing? When you were practicing, how much was the maximum you would practice during a day when you were preparing for your LTCL?
So actually, I was quite lucky to have a lot of time to practice, and so I used to practice for like 3.5 hours a day sometimes. But sometimes it could also have been less. So I was flexible on the number of hours that I was playing per day. But I do believe that more than the quantity of time, it's important to have a, the quality of time that you give while practicing.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to have you here today and hear it straight from you. So Josh Hendricks is in Mumbai. He's an LTCL in violin and a very promising young violinist. The last person we spoke to was DL, Priya.
Right. Yes. So as you saw, Josh said quality over quantity every time. And here we have DL Lobo, another fine young musician who has gone into our profession. DL is a teacher working in Muscat currently. She believes in slow practice. Interestingly, is both an LTCL in piano and an ATCL in singing. So for the piano, she feels that slow practice is as important at the end of your mastering a piece as it is in the beginning when you're learning it. That's a very interesting point and something that a lot of concert artists also follow, that you play it slowly right at the end when you think you know it well, so that you refresh yourself once again and in your piece at leisure with slow practice. And she also believes in doing all the technical work in isolation, taking it out of the piece, doing various things to it, not just playing it straight, but changing the rhythm and other things to completely become familiar with it. As a singer, DL feels that rhythm is all important. So one way of first embedding the rhythm thoroughly in yourself as a singer, you say the words of a song, don't pitch them, only say them in the correct rhythm. And to extend and to understand how keys work and how key movements work, as well as to also somewhere extend the register and range of your voice, sing the song in different, push yourself, challenge yourself. Don't just go with the key in which it's written. Again, very valuable tips, I think, and thank you to DL. She was very, very helpful with her inputs and her support.
So before we sign off from what I think has been a very interesting webinar, I hope I would just like to leave you with one quote. Just because something is difficult doesn't mean you shouldn't try. It just means you should try harder. So never give up. Practice gets you there. Practice does make perfect, and it does help you progress. And before we share our email IDs with you, Priya is going to tell you a very short story, which is really, really relevant here.
Thank you, and I hope the connection allows me to be heard. Well, here we are in New York City, place of iconic buildings, mecca of sightseers, great music landmarks in New York City. There is Carnegie Hall for concerts, there's the Metropolitan Opera House, there's Broadway, and we have a tourist who's hopelessly lost, hunting for various places. So he goes to a cab driver and he says, "Can you please tell me how to get to Carnegie Hall?" And the cab driver tells him, "Practice, practice, practice." We all have our own personal Carnegie halls that we want to get to. And the answer, how to get there, is what the cab driver said. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya, for sharing this. These are our email IDs if you need anything. The PPT will be shared. I mean, the PDF of the PPT will be shared with you as well as a recording. We have all your email IDs when you registered, so it will come to you as soon as the video is ready. And if you need to contact us, I'm sorry, there is a mistake here in Priya's email ID. I
just saw
corrected it. Yes, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
It's Priya at trinitycollege.in. It's not difficult, and I'm sure most of you are regulars and know about this. So thank you very much for attending. I hope you have enjoyed this as much as we've enjoyed bringing this to you. And there's just one point I'd like to clarify here. There were a couple of questions about writing on the music. We did say that do not write anything that helps you with the musical knowledge segment of the exam, but you are free to write in exam books. I shared with you what an examiner said. There is no rule that you have to have no markings on the exam books. Why would you do that? You don't need to do that. That just shows that you are now, you have really studied the music and you have prepared to the best of your ability. And these are just little, what's the word one should use here? I'm at a little loss here. But they're
Yourself.
little triggers. They're little triggers, to remind you. That's it. So, Gopal, is there anything else we need to address in the Q&A? I'm going to stop sharing screen. There's a lot of questions about the new digital exam, which I will advise you to please check with your customer support office. And I will not be giving information on this at the moment. So if you have difficulty in measures, yes, people are agreeing that they write down the score and then I get it. Suggest some practice that can be used, especially
Practice
for,
apps.
oh, it says practice here. Okay, practice apps. Well, you'll have to look up, but there are a lot. So we can't really pinpoint one. There are a lot of them, but you have to judge what is good and for you.
Have to really, we wouldn't like to endorse any app, but there are a lot of good ones. See what fits you and what suits you.
So the e-certificate, you will get a certificate of appreciation and participation for this webinar. Well, this question about the metronome, will you advise always practice with the metronome? We had a bit of a discussion on this yesterday. And while some people do endorse practicing with a metronome always, I personally do not do it in my teaching. Yes, I use it as an aid. You remember I said use technology as an aid. But
I would use the metronome to set a tempo, but I would also, because I feel, and that's a personal opinion, it to let your music breathe. Your music shouldn't be made into rigid compartments with a metronome can do. It like moderation and carefully.
yes. So, but it's very personal. It can be, for different people, it may be different. It may work. If it works for you, please do go ahead and use it. Ritesh has asked, Ritesh Bhattacharya, can we promote rock and pop exams more as the youth is more interested in rock and pop? You can promote any exams, any music exams, definitely whatever the candidate is interested in. I agree. The youth is more interested in rock and pop. Okay.
Yes, Ritesh. We know you prefer rock and pop. And
Yes.
thank you for being here. It's great to hear.
People are asking for analysis on preludes by Bach. There's a lot available on the internet. I use a very old book. I can't remember who it's by, but it's from my days of learning. So it's really, really old. I'm sure you have a lot more on the internet. If you can, the same person has said he needs help in analyzing. If you don't have a teacher, maybe you could write us a mail and we could help you along if we can.
Yes, certainly. Drop us a mail if you need help in analysis of Bach.
So once again, thank you very much. Gopal, is it all okay?
Yes, ma'am, it's fine now.
Okay. Trinity has piano. Does it have piano accompaniment on Spotify? Now for a lot of the instruments it does have. You'll have to see what is the instrument that you are looking for. And I'm sorry, I can't help you with your name on the certificate. What have you registered as? So there's somebody called Ram who said that please write the name on the certificate. It'll be what you have registered as because these are generated automatically. Yes, you can jump any grades, Gulmira. You can go to any grade without having done the previous.
How to find a piece to improve themselves. That was the question. Well, if it's your technique, there are a lot of like those by Hannon and by Cherny, which deal exclusively technical exercises. If you're looking at something else, there's something for everything. And of course, the music that you play has many help embedded within it for improving technique. You need to know what area of improvement you're looking at.
There will be an announcement about the theory exams very soon, so please wait for that. It all depends on the situation in November. Thank you very much. I'm going to sign off now. Thank you, Priya, and thank you to all the attendees. We've enjoyed doing this for you.